Chapter 14. The Visitor from the Furthest North. High Peak is the lighthouse of the moors, a tump of ground which rises to an outcrop of rocks. On a clear day, the view is not just spectacular, it is almost supernatural. People have seen remarkable, impossible sights from up here. Walkers have said that they looked east and saw right across the country to the North Sea. Lots more have said that they looked west and saw the Irish Sea on the other side. Others claim to have seen the mountains of Mourne in Ireland, and one little girl said she saw all the way to Holland once, in the other direction. It was as flat as a slipper, and the colour of tulips, she said, and it had windmills. To get to High Peak from Woodside Terrace, you cross the stream, climb up the other side of the valley, and take the road until it runs out. Then you follow the track until that runs out, and all you are left with is a path. You follow this path for a while, like Moses crossing the Red Sea, staying on the narrow trail between waves of moorland, and after a mile or so there is High Peak, like a watchtower in the sky. It was hard work for Jim, and even harder for Aubrey with his shorter legs, but at least the snow had stopped falling. There were clouds heavy with more goose feathers driving southwards overhead. Here and there were ragged gaps where starlight showed, and the luminous snow gathered every photon of light, collected it and bounced it back at the clouds, so that Jim and Aubrey walked over a glowing white moor, under clouds like a swollen sea. Star patches rode in this sea, above them, like islands. The snow crunched softly under their feet. "Where are you taking me, Aubrey boy?" "Guess." "I think I know. You probably do." "Feel like a view, eh, Aubrey? I doubt we'll see Holland tonight." "There's someone we've got to meet." "Really?" cried Jim, alarmed. "In the middle of the night? Who?" A visitor from furthest north," Aubrey said. "I've never met her before." "Not someone you met on the internet," Jim demanded. "Not some crazy kook." Aubrey decided his father needed to know one or two things. "Dad, you know the heron? His name's Ardea. He's a friend of mine, right?" Jim laughed. "That makes sense," he exclaimed. "Well, not sense exactly, but..." "And you know the raven and the squirrels and Marcel the fly? They're sort of my friends too." Jim nodded. He might have been having a bad time recently, but he was still a man who understood stories very well, and knew there were more stories in even the smallest wood than could ever be written or imagined. "I'd like to meet them," Jim said. "Except that raven, I've had plenty of him, but I guess they don't talk to everyone." Aubrey was extremely relieved. "This is that kind of friend. We'll recognise her when we see her, according to Athena." "Got you," said Jim. "Who's Athena? Some sort of owl?" "Some sort is right," Aubrey grinned. The last scramble up the side of High Peak made them both pant. They were not far from the top when Aubrey stopped. "Dad, look, she's there!" Jim peered ahead. He could see the outcrop of stones that marked the highest point, but there was nothing. Wait, there was something there. Perching on the stones themselves was a shape, a huge mantled shape like an eagle, but white as the moor. "It's a..." Jim gasped. "She's a..." Aubrey panted. "She's a snowy owl," Jim whispered. It's incredible. They hardly ever come to this country. What a blessing. We'd better not get too close or we'll scare her away." "We won't," Aubrey said. "Come on, we'll talk to her." "You really think?" Yes. "Yes," said a deep, gentle voice. "Come up." "That was her?" Jim squeaked. Jim and Aubrey climbed together, holding hands, until they arrived at the top of High Peak and stood before the great snowy owl. Close up they could see she had riffles of black feathers among the white, and her eyes were like huge amber lanterns. Her beak was shiny black, and her feet were tufted with thick white feathers, as if she were wearing plump slippers. Shiny black talons, sharp as scimitars, curved out of her toes. The snowy owl squeezed her yellow eyes at them in an owl smile. "My name is I know this, Scandiacus," she said, "but my friends call me Bubo. Now, why have I come to see you?" Aubrey cleared his throat. Hello, Bubo. I think you've come to help us with the terrible Yoot, have you?" "Only you can help yourselves with him," said the owl. but I can help you to help yourselves. Why is he troubling you? He says he's lonely and he likes Dad. What is this Yoot? Jim asked. Although he could hear Bubo and Aubrey talking telepathically, he'd asked the question aloud. Aubrey answered him the same way. The terrible Yoot is the voice in your head that has been making you so sad, Aubrey told him. He's the source of all your troubles, but he's only a small dung beetle in the other world, and he's lonely there. But when he comes here, he becomes this monster, and when he tries to be kind to you, it comes out all wrong and tortures you. A dung beetle? Jim looked dazed. What do you want to know about him? Bubo asked. Why is he called the Yoot? Ah, that is the question. How do you spell his name? Y-O-O-T, Aubrey said. Bubo smiled again. Do you know the difference between an acronym and a proper noun? She asked. An acronym is some sort of symptom, Aubrey guessed, like spots? No, Jim cried. An acronym is made of the first letters of a series of words, like radar comes from the first letters of radio, detection, and ranging. Or FAQ, frequently asked question. A proper noun is a name for a thing or a person, like Aubrey. Dad's an English teacher, Aubrey explained. Bubo shuffled her feathers. Yoot is not a proper noun, it's an acronym. We need to know what it stands for then, Aubrey exclaimed. What might it stand for? Bubo returned. Yowl, oh, terrible. You, orange or terror. You, oink, oink, tomorrow. Do you know what a homophone is? Asked the owl, rising up slightly. She looked enormous. It was like being tested by a huge headmistress with a massive beak and claws, Aubrey thought. Don't be scared, he told himself. You can deal with owls. Go on, Aubrey, Jim said. Try. Is it like a xylophone? Nearly, Jim said. Xylo means wood in Greek. Phone is sound. Xylophone is wood sound. Homo means same in Greek, so homophone is the same sound, a word that sounds the same as another word. Correct, said Bubo, with a low purring sound. She reminded Aubrey of other great hunters she had seen on television. He had seen. She was like a lion or something, but owlish. Yes, Jim said. Homophones are words with the same sound but different meanings, and often a different spelling. Aubrey saw it now. So his name sounds like Yoot, but it's not spelt Yoot. How is it spelt? Y-U-T-E? Jim suggested. Shorter, hooted the owl. U-T-E, cried Aubrey. Indeed, said Bubo. So what does it stand for? Utterly terrible evil, Aubrey tried. But he's not evil, is he? Bubo prompted gently. Aubrey thought. I was sure he was until I met him. He does evil things, but not in this world, and he doesn't mean to. I believe that, so he's not exactly evil, no. You have one word right, but you need to swap the adjectival form for the noun. Dad, help! Well, Jim said, utterly is an adverb. You note because it ends in ly. Evil is a noun and an adjective, and anyway, you say this thing isn't evil, though it feels pretty evil to me. But if it's not that, then it must be terrible. If terrible is the adjective, what is the noun? Nouns and adjectives, Aubrey cried. Why can't they all go and boil their heads? Bubo narrowed her eyes at the boy. Jim shook his head. Terror, he said patiently. The noun is terror. Ugly terror enemy? Aubrey guessed, excited now. Bubo's eyes narrowed. Was he really ugly when you met him in the desert? Aubrey paused. No, not at all. He was just trapped in his existence. Existence, repeated the owl. 2 words right. You something terror existence. What is the you? You is everything, said Bubo. Universal, Jim said instantly. It's the only you that means everything. Correct, said the owl. And there's an of in there too. Universal terror of existence, Aubrey said slowly. He's the universal terror of existence. What is that? What does it sound like? Think. Bubo ruffled her feathers and spun her head around, looking far into the night. Aubrey turned away. The snow was not falling now. There was no wind. The moor sparkled all the way to the clouds. What was the universal terror of existence? Jim put his arms over Aubrey's shoulders so that Aubrey stood with his back to his father, keeping warm. It's something everyone has, Aubrey said, if it's universal. That makes sense to me, Jim said. I've been feeling terrified in my existence, but I didn't think of being terrified of it. If you didn't exist, you wouldn't be terrified, Aubrey thought out loud. And I didn't want to exist, Jim agreed. So, existence means terror? Aubrey frowned. Isn't that a bit bleak? Let me show you a thing or two about bleak, said Bubo. Look that way. What do you see? Aubrey and Jim followed the direction of the owl's gaze. The moors fell away to the south, low horizontals of snow running to the sky. Just the moors and the cloud, Aubrey said. Nothing much. Bleak? Bubo inquired. Pretty bleak, Aubrey laughed. Now watch, said the owl. The snowy owl drew herself up in a stretch, like someone straightening her back, and spun her head first to the left, then to the right, so that her blazing gaze swept all the moors around. Now she looked south and hunched forward, as if she were about to take off, and dug her mighty talons into the crevices of her perch. Her wings unfurled, and she began to beat them. To Aubrey it was as though a great bluster of icy wind had erupted around him, but then, instead of freezing him, it seemed to stream away towards the skyline. As he watched, the miracle began.